Hi everyone, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm sitting with my good friend Adi Sharabani, who is the co-founder and CEO of a wonderful mobility security company called Skycure. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here.
Driving around looking for parking, right?
That is the very less like. But
we're here at the Fulton Street studio where it's easy to get here by subway and train and foot, but it's terrible to get here by car. So
yeah,
I should have
I
warned
had
you.
Customers and prospects all over, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So
good to have a car.
Yeah.
Next time you come, we'll shuttle you around on a skateboard or something. Probably do all these. Hey, listen, congratulations! Tell us about the great news. You guys have an recent acquisition to announce.
Yeah, so as of 2 weeks ago, the deal was closed for Symantec to acquire Skycure. As part of that, we're building a unit that is focused on the modern operating systems, and very excited with the whole new roadmap and much faster sales motions, obviously. And great team, like Greg Clark, that's the CEO over there. Who you know well.
I do.
Is doing an amazing job, so really honored to be part of that team.
They're an iconic brand. There's probably 2 or 3 brands that have been with us from the beginning, and they're definitely one of them. It's so exciting. So it's a big company, right? They're, it seems like they've spread their wings pretty wide.
Yeah, and with Skycure, I believe that we're the only company in the world that provides full solution for all threats on any device, anywhere. And this is really exciting.
No, that's great. Now, one of the things I know that you guys are very proud of is your integration, the idea that you can connect up into an ecosystem. I'm guessing that dropping the tool into the Symantec ecosystem is probably one of the first things you'll work on. Am I reading that right?
Very much correct. So Symantec has their SEP product as an example, the endpoint protection solution, and it's been deployed on, I don't know if I'm allowed to share how many devices, but like tremendous amount.
A lot.
And when you look at organizations that are enjoying this, at the end of the day, only half of their endpoints are being protected. The other half, the mobile devices, the iPads, the tablets, these are not being protected today. And with Skycure, we can really provide a full solution over there. So you're going to see a lot of work together with the SEP team to provide one experience when using all of these solutions.
You think that experience increasingly is more mobility-centric than, say, PC-centric?
So I think in general,
in business,
yeah. So today we see, there are many reports that shows that so much of our activity is being conducted on the mobile devices. In fact, I know CEOs that are running Nasdaq-traded companies from their iPhones, right? And together with that movement into these mobile devices, the entire way we need to think security needs to be changed. And this is what got Yair and me to start Skycure, and this is what got us to be so successful in the field.
Yeah. The integration element, I would imagine, between mobility-centric tools and, say, more enterprise-centric tools, probably a good thing to do that in advance of selling to CISOs, because I don't think a lot of enterprise teams have experience doing that. It seems like that's a good place to do the work in advance of a deployment.
Yeah, and I think everyone tried to look around when the mobile devices became very useful for the business, and there were no good real security solutions in terms of active protection and detection and visibility, integration into the SIEM platforms and SOC operation and all of that. I believe that today MDM and EMM solutions are so common in so many organizations, and we have great relationship and integrations with those. But I also see that these organizations need solutions that will speak to the other security offerings that they have, that would identify the fact that your desktop has been breached, and hence there might be implication on your iOS and vice versa. These solutions, these companies needs an active area. Like if I speak to CISOs a lot, right? And every single one of them always tell me, when it comes to mobility, I don't even have good visibility into what's going on. So we're very excited to bring that to market.
Tell me more about deployment. So when somebody says, I love the tool, I want to do it, I'm guessing that's probably one of the strengths of what you and the team do, that making it easy to deploy. That seems like a real stumbling block in a number of different areas. How do you make that easy?
Correct, and that was a big challenge that we took upon ourselves throughout the journey of Skycure, because it's one thing to tell you, hey, here is the Skycure solution, just install it and we'll get you secured. But in reality, in the mobility area, the challenge that you're alluding to is the fact that the user is almighty. The user is actually root of the device, while the IT is sort of a guest on the device. And that created a lot of challenge around deployment. We've invested a huge amount of efforts, both in terms of the product, how it operates, how you can always run, how you can be centric around events rather than try to do things behind the scenes that Apple or Google would not like. And we've been very successful for that, but aside of this, we really invested a lot of efforts in the soft areas, in how to communicate with the employees, in how to automate the process for the organization. And one of the things we're really excited is that it's not that we tell you where to be as a customer, but we actually show you how to get there. A great example was one of the largest banks that we recently closed, and within 1 week after contract was signed, 4,000 devices were already enrolled. Within that week of time, we were already capable of providing much value in identifying malware on Android, on iOS, in identifying network threats, identifying vulnerabilities that they have been exposed to, and the ability to bring value in 1 week of experience with the company has been, they have found very valuable for them.
On the network threat side, it must be quite an experience when you see that deployment with a large bank. I hope it's a bank that I keep my money in, that they're using a product, but it must be weird to look and think that up until that deployment, all those network threats were real, right? That's, is network threat one of the drivers that you see?
Definitely. So we see.
It would seem like it would be.
Yeah, it's definitely is, and I think that with the amount of tools that perform these attacks that people can download or buy online, we see huge increase in those activities, malicious activities. And there is huge increase in the mobility business-related activities that are being conducted outside of the corporate network, right? And so the risk to organizations drastically increased. And some of these problems are new, but others are pretty old. Like the classic man-in-the-middle problem is something that we talked about 3 decades ago easily, right? But now suddenly they are becoming much more impactful for the organization. But network is one category that drives the decision for mobile threat defense. Other areas that drives MTD projects are malware, well-known problem, vulnerability exploitation, and we see some very interesting things going on these days, and physical access to the device that is still a problem that is somehow being handled by other solutions, but not in all use cases.
Is it hard to detect malware on a mobile device?
So, in a lab, it's one thing. In reality, it's a totally different game. And what I see that a lot of players in this field try to focus on the old paradigms of, I will create a sandbox, I will run my solution, I will do static analysis or dynamic analysis or whatever. And here are a bunch of malware I created or found. I put it in my system, I show you that I can find them. But in reality, knowing the other malicious actors, it works differently because the attackers, they have the same lab. So it's very easy for them to create malware, and we've seen this again and again in Black Hat and RSA and conferences like this, that in minutes you can create variations that the other solutions will not be able to detect. And for that reason, I do believe that we need to change the way we, as industry, think about how do we protect ourselves, how we detect ourselves, to an area where no one can create a lab. There is no lab, there is no sandbox by itself that you rely your entire solution on, but rather leverage the full power of the crowd. Leverage the fact that we have so many users that are legitimate, that can be used in order to identify more sophisticated attacks in ways we couldn't done before.
You think that's the direction? Like the pro of crowd clearly is a massively expanded vector of researchers and peers and others that are providing useful guidance as you develop defenses. The con is a lot of work to sift out the good from the bad, from the this to that. You see that as being a challenge, and certainly as you join the Symantec team, you'll have access to some of the best research, I would imagine, in the world. But do you think crowd is more pro than con?
I think
for that sort of thing?
This is a great question, and I think that it really depends on the technology behind the word crowd. It's like machine learning, right?
Yeah.
There are so many great benefits and a lot of challenges. The way I look at it is that you need to define your solution in a way that will be not heuristic, that you will not know why the tool deducted that there is a threat or not, because then you can't really trust it, you can't really see it, and so on.
Right.
So we have always focused on solutions that always yield information. I will never tell you that you are under a threat. I will tell you that you are under a threat because of those specific reasons. And that context, if you build a solution that has this context built into it, then by design you have less issues of false positives and all these areas that classic or the first attempts of machine learning and other tools like this suffered from.
You mentioned vulnerability management as one of the drivers. I know in a typical enterprise that's a big challenge. It includes patching and all the day-to-day, sometimes very mundane tasks. Is that something that you automate, and do you
definitely.
sort of help teams with that?
Yeah, and in the mobile front, in these modern operating systems, there are things that are a bit easier and things that are a bit harder. For example, the notion of update is a bit easier in some of these systems. However, in the Android platform specifically...
Easier with Apple.
Easier with Apple, yeah definitely.
Well, they control the whole ecosystem.
Still, you need the user to be involved,
True.
Which is different than in the Windows platform.
Sure.
In the Android platform, we have the problem of fragmentation of the operating system. So every time we identify a threat, we report to Google, Google fixes it, and they release a patch. The issue is that this patch needs to go through the carriers or all other service devices. Yes, exactly. And they need to take the patch, merge it in, test it, push it to their end users.
Right.
The reality is that you and I may have the exact same Android version on the exact same hardware, but you will have an update to install and I will not. And many organizations suffer from this problem, and for that reason they can't really manage on the practical level the problem of updates. So we have a unique technology that allows you to know which device exactly has an update, in which geolocation and so on, and create a policy based on that. But on top of that, we don't stop there, because vulnerability management is one thing that is very important. We also have unique technology on the devices, whether it's iOS or Android, to identify attempts of exploits, to identify successful exploits, and identify manipulations to the operating systems. On top of all of that, we have crowd-related capability that identify that your device suddenly behaves differently than all other devices that I've seen before. So very sophisticated technology. 3 weeks ago, we have identified something pretty serious that we're working with Apple to fix now. And hopefully in the coming months we'll be able to share it with you.
Well, keep doing that, please. That certainly helps all of us. Now, cloud, I would imagine threat intelligence and so on is something that, is there a tight interaction with cloud systems and other types of sort of ubiquitous all-source intel to sort of breathe the information that you need into the product? Am I saying that right? Is that exist in a cloud ecosystem?
The fact that these mobile devices move so much actually makes it becomes the best sensors in the world, because they collect different types of data points. Also, because we are focused a lot in organizations, we are seeing that there is a good amount of value that the devices within your own organization will bring to other people from your organization, because there is good correlation between the activities of employees of the same organization. So for that reason, we see that the most important valuable asset that we have is actually the Skycure devices themselves. With that said, we do share much of this information with the public. We have maps.skycure.com, an open project that everyone can go and browse to, and search our database for threats that we've identified in any area in the world. And we are constantly creating more and more tools for our partners to be able to utilize as they are building their security processes.
That's fantastic. Now let's talk future.
Yeah.
Where's this all going? Do you see mobility becoming a safer or maybe a less safe place? Do we have to get worse to get better, or what do you think if you had to graph it? Where are we
and I
headed?
think it a lot depends on the definition of safe. So I see that on one hand, there are so many new capabilities that these mobile devices introduce. And every time a new capability is being introduced for us good users, there is a new capability that is being introduced to the malicious actors out there. So from the problem space, the problem only increases. We're working very closely with the OS vendors, so the design of the operating systems becomes better and better.
I see.
But attacks are not going anywhere. In fact, we're seeing a huge increase in attacks on the mobile platforms. Just recently, we released a threat intelligence report on iOS, only focused on iOS, covering the last 10 years and talking a little bit about the future, and I would recommend all users to go and search for it. But at the end of the day, every organization, all devices becomes modern in that sense, and attackers are not going anywhere. And the only question is what you as an organization do about it. Do you have any controls to identify those threats and to protect yourself against them? We see from projects perspective, a huge increase in the amount of projects in organizations that we support to go and improve their security in the mobility realm. And for that reason, Symantec decided to make such a substantial strategic investment in Skycure.
Right. So that's a pretty optimistic answer, it sounds like.
I think that
more optimistic than pessimistic.
I think that from the security business, we're only going to see much more organizations invest in Skycure or like products. But at the end of the day, as it was through the decades of security, there is this battle between the good players and the bad players. The level of weapons becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's something that we can cope with and understand how to live with and understand how to manage. Right. The only importance here is to continue to fight, is to continue to look and understand how you manage your organization. I've seen organizations that are really good at it, trying to predict what are the nature of threats that they're going to see, which devices are going to see the biggest growth in those threats, and based on that defines their risk and where they're going to make investments. And the organizations that are left behind, and sometimes they suffer more than
It's
others.
just interesting because if you go back to the late 1930s, early 1940s, you and I, if we were talking, we'd be worried about two things: bank robberies and the beginnings of some nuclear sort of issues in our world. And we can see bank robberies we never talk about anymore. I mean, they still happen, but it's, to your point, we know they happen, we can live with it as long as you're not
They're
the
not
teller
new
being
to us,
held
so
up.
we know how to relate
That's right.
to those.
Whereas nuclear has gotten worse. And I think it's sort of the canonical examples of a quote-unquote somewhat solved problem and a clearly unsolved problem. I guess cyber, the jury's still out. We'll have to see. But I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing. Helps us all. And I'm so happy that you're part of Symantec. That's great, great marriage of two wonderful firms. And I hope as you get into it more, you come back and visit with us.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for coming by. And we'll see you next time.